Hello, welcome to David's Life and Observation with your host, David Welch. Today we're discussing the Amber Guyger sentencing and why it's shameful and bullshit. First off, there are people who commit nonviolent crimes who get way more fucking time. Like there's a lady who stole a jacket, it was like $100 jacket or some shit, and she ends up getting like 30 fucking years. There are people that stole shit back in 1970 something that got 25-year sentences. There are people that have been caught with illegal substances like marijuana who have longer sentences than someone who committed murder. Amber Guyger deserves the death penalty. She took a life. Her life should be forfeit. I wholeheartedly believe it. And everyone shouting from the rooftops that it was an accident can suck my nuts, because it's not an accident to go to the wrong floor. And once you're inside, you realize that none of that shit's yours and this dude's doing his own fucking thing in his own fucking home. That's a home invasion by a police officer. Whether she's on duty or off duty doesn't fucking matter. She went in there and murdered him. Didn't render CPR, didn't render aid of any sort. It's apparent from all the audio. It's apparent from the information that we've gotten. She lied about rendering aid. She never did. For someone who lies on the stand, who's lied repeatedly about their narrative and their story, to only get a 10-year sentence, of which she's probably only going to do 5 for good behavior, is fucking shameful. I don't care if the brother hugged her ass or not. And fuck that dude. Like, how much love did you really have for your brother if you're okay with his murderer only doing 10 years? At the most, he's going to do 7. Maybe. Fucking shameful. It's fucking despicable. Why is it that time and time again, cops get extremely light sentences, or they just get fired and they go right to another police agency down the road? It's fucking shameful. It's embarrassing, and we should not let that shit happen as the American people. Why the fuck does that happen? Why do all these politicians in fucking Washington, D.C. get caught with prostitutes, coke, illegal substances? Nothing happens to them but a slap on the wrist. We live in a fucked world where people who commit nonviolent crimes are getting more time than officers committing murder. And more often than not, officers never go to fucking jail, never see the inside of a prison cell when they do commit murder. Why is that? Oh, because they're sovereign citizens, they're heroes when they do nothing heroic. What the fuck do police do that is heroic? Other than create conflict with people to either find them or put them in jail or put them in a cage. Every interaction, whether it's even for a welfare check, they come in, they violate someone's rights, and then they end up killing that person. We see it time and again. They don't know how to deal with the mental health community because they themselves are part of that community. They just don't want to believe it. They suffer from a complex that is about authority. They really are like a living, what is experiment? What experiment is that? I'm trying to think of the name of the, I'm going to fucking kick myself later, but it's an experiment where these scientists, or a scientist in particular, gave someone the ability to shock someone, and then them with their coat and everything like that said, hey, shock them, and these people did, and they felt sick about it, but they did it anyway. And it doesn't matter the level of pain they were issuing to people, they never took it upon them. Not many took it upon themselves to stop. They just did what they were told. Officers suffer from this. They suffer from a very unique style of Stockholm Syndrome, where they, in their heart, they know they're doing wrong, but they're beholden to it because they make great money fucking people over. They make great money ruining lives. That's like the only profession I know that really goes after other humans. They're human hunters. They find them or find a way to put them in a cage, and they do no public good. Now, every so often, every very few number of cases do they actually save a life, or do they actually do something that benefits the community. Now, there have been some feel good stories out there lately, and I got to give credit where credit's due, where an officer shows up to a noise complaint, joins the jam session. Middle of the day, I'm sorry, but people make a lot of false reports, a grip of false reports, and we got to do something about that too. People who file false reports should do prison time, in my opinion, because you're actively trying to ruin someone's life. If you don't come to a police officer or a judge with evidence of a crime or evidence of some sort of wrongdoing, then you need to shut the fuck up and mind your own business. You really do. You need to either walk the fuck away from that situation or observe long enough and be willing enough to either say, hey, like, you need to cut that out, or hey, if you do not correct this behavior, which you have to be able to tell them how illegal it is. Now, this is something I really, really don't like. What I don't like is people who are making things up. Now, and that's something that happens all the time. People add details, they add information that really is trying to add a criminal element to somebody's lawful activity. And here's a prime example of how this happens. You have a community out there called First Amendment auditors, people who go to public buildings and film because they're legally allowed to do that. More often than not, you'll have security or you'll have personnel who at these buildings or at these facilities who lie and say, hey, he assaulted me, he went into our secured area, yada, 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 to try and get them out of the building or to try and get them put in a cage. Now, if I'm the officer who responds to a call like that, first, recording in a public space is not illegal. You can't trespass the eyes. So whatever the eyes can see is whatever they can see. So that's good information for people who do not know that. A lot of people would always have the argument, or would you stand outside somebody's house and film? Well, yeah, if they're on the public property, they're allowed to do that, and you are filmed a lot anyway by a bunch of businesses, by public buildings. Regardless if you want to or you want them to, they have you on film. Now, the go-to response to that is, oh, well, they do it for security reasons. Well, people who do these First Amendment audits have film for exactly the reason you're trying to defend, is security of themselves. Because if they did not film or document what was going on in those interactions with public officials, people who we employ as the people whose entire paycheck is coming out of tax money, they need to be held accountable. And the best way for someone to do that is to be a citizen and document anything that they're doing wrong, or providing these audits showcase how corrupt your local government or your local public officials are. This needs to happen more on the federal level, but at the same time, doing it at the local level, at the county level, at the state level, at the city level is okay. It's okay for citizens, to go into public places. Now, there's a difference. Now, if there is a federal courthouse or even a state courthouse, and they have a standing order from a judge, and it's in writing, and it's got the seal of the city, everything like that. If it's official order, you can't go into the courtrooms because judges reserve the right, I guess, somehow, to tell people, hey, you can't go in the courtroom. That does not prohibit people from going into the entire courthouse. People are allowed to understand what public information is available to them. A lot of these First Amendment audits are very simple. Somebody with a camera goes into a public building and asks for publicly accessible information at the desk. What often happens is you have city employees, county employees, or whatever have you, get upset and call men with guns to come remove the person with the camera simply because they feel they have a right to not be recorded in the course of their duties, and that's just not the case. Is it annoying for the city worker? Yes, but if that's annoying to you, then don't do the job. Go find another profession. A lot of people give shit to younger generations because they want to say, oh, well, you need to go find a different job, or you need to do something else than work at McDonald's, or whatever the case may be. And that's because they get low pay. People have to take whatever they can. It's not so much that people want to work at McDonald's. It's not so much that people want to work in fast food or as a waiter, things like that. People do that to get by. People do that because, and it's not even because they don't have the education. There are people who with master's degrees that are busting or serving tables right now. There are people with master's degrees that cannot get jobs because they're too high qualified, or they're too, their resume may scare the shit out of the employer because they're like, dude, we're gonna have to pay this dude a lot of money. That doesn't help our bottom line. We can get somebody at a lower end of the education spectrum to do a cheaper job. I mean, to do the job but cheaper, and it's been the modus operandi for companies to do that. More and more, and this is happening more and more because of the lack of jobs. People who do hold high level degrees, people who do have master's degrees, are doing whatever they can to get by, but they're also building a bigger book of business for whatever profession they're into, whether it's um, writing books or writing or doing research, things like that. Now, a lot of people can get hired to research lab. Um, at different skill levels and different education levels, but those jobs are coveted and they're really hard to come by. So it really depends on the industry. Now, engineers have a little bit more flexibility, but again, even with engineers, you can have a master's degree in engineering, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the job because you may need further education, as in certifications, licensing, things like that. And that, delves into the trade realm. For a lot of people who have masters in engineering or bachelors in engineering, a lot of the times they need something to supplement that. Like um, people often get like project management, like their PMP or other things, to also showcase, hey, I can, not only am I an engineer, I can handle large scale projects. And sometimes it's even more than that. Like a lot of people with business masters, their MBAs are a dime a dozen. People are like, man, you got an MBA, you got an MSL, you got a, MFA, or whatever the title is for your degree. That's all fine and dandy, but people also want licenses and certifications. Like, let's say you're an MBA, but you work in the IT realm and your business is IT. A lot of the times, you're still going to need those certifications. You're going to have to take $500 certification test with a little bit more education in the IT world, because that's the venue for the business that you choose to be in. So sometimes it's really tough out there, even with a very educated person, to get work. So there is a line of work that is that it's in development, and I'm going to do a documentary on this soon, with a lot of interviews, and put together like a legit documentary about First Amendment, Second Amendment auditors who go out in the community and they actually do a public good. For a lot of people, I don't know why, but a lot of people think like, oh well, they're bought into a mindset. They're bought into, the cop's just doing his job. A lot of people use that as an excuse for an armed man to stop them for a nonviolent crime and steal their money and extort them. A lot of people are like, well, the cop's just doing his job. What a horrible job. What a piss poor way to live your existence, is confronting people who fail to use a turn signal, or confronting people who um, are driving a mile or 2 miles over the speed limit. Now, a lot of times officers will leave people the fuck alone, even if they're going five over. But, if they're trying to make quota, if they're trying to issue as many tickets as they can for the day, and mind you, law enforcement officers issue hundreds of tickets a day just for one officer. They write, upwards of, they probably write 50 to 100 tickets a day, and that generates revenue for the city, that generates revenue for the state. And it's despicable because we have a system in place where officers go out of their way to extort people and have confrontations with um, the community in order to generate revenue. So they're not doing a public good. They're not serving the community if they quantifiably do more damage than good. So I just want to hear people's argument. That comment below and just give me any reason. List the reasons that cops need to be part of the community. A lot of people will say, well, there'll be anarchy. Well, will there really? Will there really be anarchy? Like, I mean, what is it that cops will do in the community that the community can't do themselves? The community essentially hires police to confront bad guys or to keep people safe when, in fact, according to the Supreme Court, they don't have to keep you safe. They are not obligated to protect you. So time and again, when we confront police in doing their job, which they get paid a fuck ton of money for, they end up not doing it at all. Or they end up picking and choosing who they do the job for. They will never cite their own. They will never arrest their own unless it's a blatant like DUI and it's caught on camera and they radioed it in. There's literally an episode, not an episode, I say episode. There's literally a case where, this law enforcement officer, I think up in Alaska, is sitting there begging the guys that pulled him over to let him go. It's for DUI. And he's like, well, can we just make this go away? I mean, he says it so many times, and it's this, and you're looking at it and you're like, you're disgusted because if there were no cameras and they didn't radio it in, they probably would have let his ass go. They probably would have let somebody drive him home, which is amazing because you or me would get the full fucking shaft of the law. We would get the entire big black and blue dick of the law because fuck the people. And that's what happens day in and day out. Now, granted, cops deal with some shit, some medieval shit that most people never interact with at all in their life. Here's what I mean. Cops are under a tremendous amount of stress because they're doing a job that's should be, it's not always the case, but it should be observed at all times. But they're under a lot of stress because they're dealing with people who are legit dirtbags. They're dealing with people who just robbed an elderly couple and beat the fuck out of them. Or they're dealing with people that just committed murder, or they're dealing with people that are in the act of committing a burglary or assault, things like that. Now, when it's a violent crime like that, when it's a violent crime where you're threatening people's life and you're carrying a gun and you're doing all sorts of bad, and they observe you doing this, or they get a call and you're home intruding. Yeah, those people I have no remorse for when cops fuck you up. I don't. I have little remorse for people who are doing violent and doing heinous shit. When cops get big busts of like the cartel, or they get big busts of pedophile rings and things like that, no remorse for those people. I have 100%. I would even call it love. I love when officers get those busts, especially when they catch public officials in there and they throw their ass under the bus with everybody else. And it's happened. And I applaud those officers. I applaud the FBI when they get shit done like that. But what I don't applaud is the day in and day out of, and we use the excuse of, oh, well, they're so stressed at any given situation. They, and then more and more we just end up with people who are unarmed getting fucking shot. And they get shot on video and nothing happens. Nothing happens to the officer. Or at the worst, the officer gets fired and he gets hired in the next county. We allow that shit to happen in society when these people should be in prison for the rest of their life. Now, Amber Guyger, she should be in prison for the rest of her life. She should be incarcerated. She should be put in general population with the rest of the women in there for doing crimes like murder. And that's not going to happen. She's going to get a luxury suite in whatever prison that she's going to. And she's going to do 5 to 7 years, maybe. Even less than that, maybe with good behavior, we'll see. But she's not going to do the full 10 years. She's probably going to get out, be on parole for a while. She's probably going to work at a fucking Wendy's or, whatever. And it's going to be like she never fucking killed someone. She went into a man's home, his castle, his residence, and murdered him and didn't render aid. What she did was she called her partner first and then called 911. She called her partner and said, hey, I just whacked a motherfucker. I need you to come come through and help me deal with the trauma of me killing someone. And the 911 operator is probably the shittiest fucking person on the planet, and I hope they should catch some charges too, because this is the only situation where I've ever heard not the only. This is one of the few situations where a 911 operator is like, okay, well, let's think about the sanctity of life here. Are you performing first aid? Do you need an ambulance? Let me get an ambulance on the way. Nothing like that came from the 911 operator, other than, relax, calm down. Help is on the way. Like, what help? Whose help is on the way? Her help, or the gentleman's help? Which the gentleman got no first aid. She wasn't immediately on the walkie or on the phone saying, "Hey, no, I need a bus here right now. We need to get in the hospital. I'm rendering first aid. I went into the wrong home and shot him." We didn't hear any panic. We just heard, "Oh, my job is fucked." That's the only thing she was sorry about. Fuck killing the guy. I'm sorry because I lost my job, or I'm gonna lose my job over this. Like, that was your immediate concern, not the dude lying on the floor fucking bleeding? And we hear him struggling to breathe while this bitch is just standing there talking on the phone with a 911 operator who takes her sweet ass time dispatching police and ambulance. She said both, and she dispatched them, but Jesus Christ, like, hey, like, okay, where did you shoot him? Let's start first aid. Nothing like that came from her lips, and that's just appalling and amazing to me. It's bullshit is what it is. So, Amber Guyger honestly got off real light, like I said she was going to. Now, I thought they were going to find her not guilty, or they were going to find some way to throw out any charges, but she did get 10 years, which I guess is a very small win for the people. It's not even a win. That's kind of like, 10-year sentence. People with nonviolent crimes are doing more time. People that have never even committed a crime did 37 years, 40 years, 25 years, because they got life sentences. And then DNA later on said, hey, like, this guy didn't commit a crime. And then you have Louisiana prisons and jails that just hold motherfuckers for 30, 40 days longer than they should be held. And for some reason, that's not so under the microscope that they're releasing people immediately because they have a backlog in their system. Because fuck the individual's rights, because screw that person. And it's just amazing to me, the mentality of law enforcement officers. They honestly believe that they are not beholden to people. In fact, if you ask them, they're going to tell you they work for the city, some imaginary entity. Not the people of the city, just the city. The business of the city is who they work for. And they're not wrong, but they don't work for you either. They don't work for the people. And they'll even say, hey, I work for the people, but when they confront the people, they don't serve the people. And that's just amazing that they refuse to service the people. Somebody is. Anyways, but it happens. It's amazing, and it's often. And what we don't have either is a good system for the people. We don't have a good system for the people because we have situations where 9 times out of 10 you have a collusion with the defender, the defense attorney, the prosecution, and the judge, and the police, all working in tandem to get some sort of conviction, to get some sort of win out of the interaction. And either way, they're going to get money from you. At the worst, they're going to get court costs and fees. At the very end of that spectrum, they still get your time, and they still get that. People who are falsely charged, falsely accused, all these things should have a mechanism to defend against that, and we just currently don't. One of the biggest atrocities, and I spoke a little bit about this on the last video, one of the biggest atrocities that have been plaguing innocent people is these red flag laws, and the constant integration of assigning mental health problems to people who are just overall being citizens and not acquiescing to the state's every whim. And that's what happens is people get called 5150 for being an individual, for being I don't know, trying to be free in a free country. But time and again, and you know what I really don't like is officers get mad when you liken them to Nazis. They get pissed off. They're like, well, you know, this isn't Nazi Germany. You're in a free country. Like, no, not if you have to show your papers everywhere you go. Not if you have to provide documentation to a state agent everywhere you go. That's more akin to Nazi Germany, you dumb fucks. When people ask you, law enforcement officer, if you know, are you the Gestapo, you know, or if they say things to you like, hey, this isn't Nazi Germany, yet you still try and vie for their papers, even though they've committed no crime, they've done nothing wrong, then you need to stop and assess what you're really about and what job you're actually doing. You're not doing a job that's a good job. There's no good in it. You extort people and you put people in cages at the threat of violence all the time. And it's not, there's nothing good about what you do. Now, for the officers that render first aid, or they'll jump into a river and save a kid, or they'll run into a burning building and pull people the fuck out, that's heroic shit. And firefighters often do that. Firefighters are actual heroes because they remove the human aspect of they remove the bullshit aspect. They're not trying to incarcerate you. They're not trying to hem you up. They go in there to do a job, and that's to save life, and preserve structures. Firefighters are amazing. EMS, amazing fucking people. Now, they get on their high horse a little bit too in some situations where they're like, oh, you can't film me, HIPAA. No, HIPAA's on you, dumbass. And if you're in a public venue and the public can see who the fuck you're carting away, then that's for the public. That the public can see that. They can get that information. For you to try and hide that information is making you look like an ass. So, it's going to be the end of my rant. Like, Amber Guyger absolutely deserves either the electric chair or life in prison without the possibility of parole. The people are being cheated justice in that situation. Now, for the non-violent offenders, we need to get a quicker mechanism to let these people the fuck out of jail. And we need to reduce bond because they are putting an insane amount of bond on people who are living paycheck to paycheck. And it doesn't even matter. It's like these law enforcement officers will coerce witnesses. They will do whatever it takes to put people in a cage. Even if they know they're only going to put them in a cage for a weekend, they're going to go that far and do it because they know that disrupts the life of the individual. They know that they're going to be able to go home at the end of the night and go to bed, and they're going to sleep like the narcissistic psychopaths that they are just fine because they don't care that they ruin people's lives. I have friends that are law enforcement officers. I have family that are law enforcement officers. And they just haven't realized that, hey, what they're doing is wrong in society. What they're doing is a dangerous job because they themselves make it dangerous. They themselves bring the danger element to the situation. They violate people's rights wantonly without any repercussion 90% of the time because 90% of the issues never see a courtroom. They don't. Because if officers violate your rights but they don't charge you with a crime, then it's very hard to get a lawyer on your side to say, hey, you know, these guys violated my rights, because a lot of times it's not worth it to them to take a case like that unless you got your ass beat, unless, you know, like they committed an excessive amount of damage to your person or your property, and then you can go after them civilly. But even then, lawyers are going to be like, okay, well, I want 30%, 40% of, you know, whatever we get, you know, plus you're still going to have to pay, court costs and court fees. And that's what happens a lot of the time. And poor people who have their rights violated often have no recourse, and they don't have the copious amount of time to go to the law library and mount their own defense. So that's what happens. Anyways, thank you for turning into David's Life and Observation. Like, comment, subscribe, and check out my Creative Cast videos too. If you are into writing and you're into reading and things like that, tune in. I'd be glad to provide you information and insight on that level too. Have a great day.